Okie dokie. So the first thing I'm going to do is decide which of the halves of this image I'm going to color with you. I think I'm going to go with the mouse, mainly because of its framing. It's a fairly simple picture, a couple of pumpkins, you know, I could see being orange, the leaves being brown, but the whole thing is nice and framed. So I just think this would be a good image to sit down and color with you. I'm going to start with the oranges because Pablo has a fantastic set of very vivid yellows and oranges. So for my pumpkins, I'm just going to grab a deep, rich orange, a base color orange, and then more of a yellow, more of a pumpkin color for the yellow. And that should allow me to get all the depth I need to pop one pumpkin out from the other so they don't all just kind of melt together. Something to keep in mind, especially if you're new, if you consider yourself a beginner in the world of coloring, anytime you have objects like this, in this case it's my pumpkins, you might come across a lot of it when it comes to flowers or any of those things in the coloring pages that you love to do that has a lot of repetition, a lot of things layered like flower upon flower, and again, this case, pumpkin on top of pumpkin. You want to grab you a nice variety, a good range for those items. So in this case, you could see that I'm using this red orange, and I'm going to use that to really pop out the lighter parts of the pumpkins. And what not only does this really make each pumpkin, you know, gives it a lot of depth, but what it really does also is, if you have another pumpkin right behind it, you're able to use the darker color on the background pumpkin, and it won't just melt into the foreground. So in other words, if I was just using one basic yellow, maybe even two oranges, there's nothing to separate the foreground from the background object. So it just looks like a basic orange right in front of another basic orange, to the point that they kind of blend together. I have enough layers here. What I'm using is a Grizaye Blender, which I would put in the category of your mid-range. It's not too aggressive, it's not too soft. This is going to allow the little middle areas where my highlights are. This is going to allow those to remain, but not dominate the image. If I wanted that part of the pumpkin, you can see where it's kind of a bright yellow. If I wanted to almost erase it out, I would use more of an aggressive blender. Or if I wanted it to almost be white, I would use a softer blender. But I think Grizaye, especially when dealing with a lot of layers, Grizaye is, for me, a perfect blender because it really, really pushes those colors together and gets that look I'm going for. And it's really good. You can see here, I'm going back on top of it with the oranges again, so it doesn't put such a wax on the paper that I can't go back into my work. Okay, hopefully in the near future, I'm going to do a video specifically on what I'm doing right now, if you want to go as far as to call it a technique. You see how I'm coloring the bottom of this pumpkin orange, and then right behind it you see another pumpkin. I am strategically going to leave the outside rim of this a lighter color. You see where it's white going around the outside traces? I'm not going to go into that with a darker color, even though lighting might suggest I need to. Even if my light source is on the left and everything is dark on the right, I am purposely going to leave the outside of that edge to be lighter than the rest of the pumpkin. Why? Because there is another pumpkin right behind it. So you always have to keep in mind not only what you're coloring, but what's around what you're coloring. because if I were to make that entire outside rim the same color orange as the background pumpkin, they're both just going to melt together and you're not going to visually be able to tell one pumpkin from the next. Okay, so right here, you see I'm using my darkest orange, the same orange I've been using to accent a lot of the depth. I'm going to push that right up against the lighter orange in the foreground. This will really pop out that pumpkin up front. I'm going to use all same three colors, but I'm just, again, strategically placing the dark oranges next to the light oranges just to showcase the one in the foreground. Now you'll also notice there is yet another pumpkin, a large one, to the back left of this one. So I'm going to leave the left side of this pumpkin to be the lighter of the colors. So when I go to do that pumpkin, I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to take the dark oranges and push it up against the light oranges on this one on the left. I know that's a mouthful, and hopefully you understand what I'm saying. It's basically I'm putting lights against darks. That's all it comes down to, and you can see here where I'm kind of doing that to to pop out the images. Okay, right here I'm jumping to the second leaf. I didn't think you'd really want to watch me do two of the same things back to back. So you could see, on the left what the outcome of this leaf is going to be. If you've watched my videos before, usually I do a very repetitive type of leaf where it has a glare on the middle. I'm doing this one a little different. I'm kind of just following the contours of this leaf with my darkest green. Then I'm going to go, you can see right here, going in the center with a lighter green. And then I'm going to go even more of a lighter, even almost neon green in the center of that. I'm doing this with the intention of leaving those highlights there. So right here, you can see my neon's still not going to fill in the entire center. That's because I'm going to go back into this one with a very soft blender, and it's going to maintain that highlight. And again, you can see on the left there that the green doesn't go all the way to the center. There's still that little bit of white that's showing through, and the soft blender allows this to happen as opposed to, something more aggressive like a color more, which will pull that green all the way into the center. So see right here, I'm not avoiding those white areas. This blender is going to allow me to go over the whole thing. It's going to soften up all that white so the highlights aren't too strong. And it's also going to really push the dark green, the base green, and that neon green. It's going to kind of melt them all together really nicely. And to talk a little bit about this image itself, the one that I'm coloring, normally when I'm going to do a color along, and the way I've done it before is, what I basically do is I'm drawing a picture to give to you and to color along with you, something usually pretty basic. I do not have the intention of coloring something and then telling you, but you need to go buy it from my shop. This is a little different, but normally I have all intentions when I'm going to do these videos is to give you the image that I'm coloring. This one's a little bit different simply because this is my new fall picture. I have a few Color Buddy images on Etsy. All this is, these little sugar shares, all it is an image that I've designed specifically for you to share with a friend. Unlike a lot of things where you buy on your Etsy and it's not exactly encouraged to buy it and then give it out to all your friends. That's the opposite of this. I created this specifically for you to go to my page, to my shop, buy it, then to give half of it to a friend. Then y'all both color it together. And then if you want to then do the other half, you could swap, or maybe you give a different friend one. And maybe y'all take turns buying these in the shop. But I really like the idea. I've seen a lot of people doing the Color Buddy stuff where they each color the same picture. So this was just my take on it. Something I thought would be a little more fun, where instead of two people are coloring the exact same picture, I thought it might be a little more fun if two people colored two different images that formed one picture. And just to point it out, what I was talking about earlier, where you put your darks to separate the two pumpkins, I'm also doing the exact same thing here. I'm doing my darks in between the little areas of the pumpkin. So because of that, I'm also leaving the outside of each of the sections a little lighter. So you could see there, it goes dark and then it kind of hits that highlighted area, and then dark again, and then you can see a little highlight and so forth. This is again going to give it that three-dimensional shape, as opposed to having the entire thing flat where you can't really you can't really separate each of these little sections of the pumpkin. And that's all I'm doing really, is I'm just working that, maybe even overworking that, just to really push those accents. Now here, to really emphasize the separation between the foreground and the background, I'm going back in with like a darker terracotta, and I'm going over the section again, really to emphasize the difference between that dark orange in the background versus the orange in the foreground. Now, if I was really thinking ahead, I would have done this before I had used the blender, because now I do have a nice layer of wax that I'm trying to kind of fight against. But yeah, I probably should have went into this before blending with the terracotta to really pop it out. But you could see, look at the difference, you know, on the right there with those pumpkins as they touch that large one in the back. It just does a much better job of popping them out. The next thing I want to do is the leaves. So you can see there is the dark green, almost a brown green, a base green, and then a light green. But none of these colors are really your true vivid greens. You can see they all have that brown earth tone to them. And I think that's going to make the pumpkins that much brighter. And I plan on doing the background in like very soft colors. So I don't want that to fight with anything in the foreground. So like the leaves and the pumpkin and the mouse, all of that I want to be pretty bright. And here I'm going back into my standard leaf color pattern, where I do the base of it towards the stem the darkest, and then the tip the darkest. And then I will constantly work these colors back and forth from light to mid to dark over and over. And I'll leave that ever so light highlight separating the base or the stem of the leaf from the tip of the leaf. And I'll just keep working this over and over until I get that acquired effect I'm looking for. And it kind of gives the leaf the illusion almost like it's folding. And now again, you see here the exact same way that little technique I was using with the pumpkin. I'm doing the exact same thing here with the leaf, where I'm using the exact same color pattern I did on the previous leaf, but this one I'm going way darker because it is on bottom, and I do not want these two greens, because I'm using the exact same three greens. I don't want them to blend together so much that you can't really tell one leaf from the other. So I'm really pushing those darks here. Okay, I need y'all to help me out here. I had several of you write saying, you know, do more of these, please, when it comes to the color along. But this is so not my nature. I feel like, and I know you could scrub through this video, and I'm sure most of you are, but I just feel like I'm being cruel making you watch this. It's, you know, I'm going back and, you know, to add the audio, and it's painful. And I was surprised, as many of you actually told me on the last video. Hey, I watched the entire thing, and you know, it just made me really happy when I realized that several of you actually got something out of it. It definitely made it worth doing. But for those of you who are actually listening to this part, and for those of you who actually do watch these entire things that I'm putting out here, let me know. Like, you can see I'm kind of jumping around. I just think it's really unnecessary to, you know, to quote unquote force you to watch me do like 10 leaves when they're all the same, or you know, like to watch me do numerous pumpkins when they're all the same. what is it that you want to get out of this? Like, how is it that you want me to put these videos out? This one took me a little over 2 hours, but as you see, there's no way I'm going to stick a video that's over an hour of you just watching me color. I'm trying to let you see some of these techniques. Also, just kind of have a little fun with you and have a little fun with coloring in general and with this art piece. But let me know, like when you sit down, what is it that when you're watching this that you say, I enjoyed that because, you know, what is that because? It'll just help me in the future put a better quality color along out there for you. Okay, so here I'm trying something a little different with the leaves. I'm not putting my typical highlight on them. I just wanted to see what a standard, straightforward leaf with dark down to light would look like. And I'm struggling with this because they feel so flat. And it was at this point that I realized, yeah, I'm going to change it up some. So what you see me doing now is trying to erase the highlight back into the leaves. And there's nothing wrong with the leaves the way they are, but you'll notice the difference from before and after. Like once I salvage these two leaves, then notice the difference of what you're looking at now versus the leaves you're about to see me do in a minute. Moving on to the vines, all this area, I want that to be tied into the leaves. So I want to make them a light brown, almost a yellow. So it's not jarring with too many colors in the foreground. And I'm going to keep them really light and really just natural looking. And as for that one little spot of yellow up there, I know it's bugging you, so yes, I will remove it. And again, something worth pointing out is the fact that I have that background back there with all the darker browns, that's going to lead me to make almost this entire vine right here yellow, because I don't want that. You can see how I have that dark brown in the middle as opposed to on the edges. So it'll still show a little depth in this vine alone, but I'm really going to darken the background up and keep the foreground light. So these two things, because the whole area is kind of, could be confusing. There's a lot going on in all of this area. So I'm really going to dig deep with the dark browns just to kind of clear up what it is you're looking at. And as you can see, I'm just going to do a lot more of the whole rinse and repeat. This is the exact same way I did the pumpkin segments, where I'm going to do the really dark brown, you know, in between, like in the folds, leaving a area for the yellowish lighter browns, and then I'll push those, you know, all the way to the edge. So there is a contrast right where the light meets the dark. Everything else you see me doing is where that fun texture comes in. You saw me just put those sections of dark brown in the middle of nowhere. Like there wasn't an ink line indicating where to do that at. But anytime you do that, whether it's a water surface or a wooden surface or whatever, it just gives it that really cool texture. You could see how in this image here, I only had, you know, a couple of lines to start with, but by adding those few areas of dark brown, it really bumps up the interest here. Okay, if you can kind of watch what I'm doing here, it's a very flat surface for this vine. So you can kind of see where I'm pushing some shapes. I'm forcing some shapes on this vine, short of my hand getting in the way of what I'm trying to show you here. You could see now all of a sudden by making these indentions, if you will, by doing the dark and then really pressing the dark and then having it kind of come out to these circular, lighter shapes, it's going to give that vine a lot more dimension than it originally had. So this is something you could be thinking about when you're playing around with big open surfaces like that, where you can create the depth with the colors you're using. I feel like I should skip through most of this ground because it just feels boring. I'm not doing too much here in the ways of anything resembling a technique. So short of us just coloring along together, there's really nothing going on here. I'm just doing the typical, light to dark. And I'm trying to push out almost like a sand color. I want to keep that orange going. Again, I don't want, to blast you with a rainbow of all these colors in this image. I want the foreground to be a lot of these earth tones, and the background is where I'm going to, push the light blue and the light pink to really emphasize everything I'm doing now. But for the most part, I'll probably kind of skip and jump around doing this area here because there's not much of interest going on here. And now because I have so much going on in this area, there's not much I'm trying to protect. I'm using the Derwent Blender. I'd say it's one step below Color when it comes to aggression. And the reason I'm using this one here is I'm really wanting to push that dark reddish brown. I'm trying to really push that into the yellows and not really salvage much in the ways of lighting. So I'm just kind of getting this one here to muddy up this area, removing all the white on the paper as well as completely blending the lights in with the darks. The background. So I went into this having an idea of what I would use. I originally was thinking of like a teal or a dominant blue with a very, very soft baby blue. And then I thought I could have that go into a yellow, like a yellowish orange, like a sunset. But ultimately, I think the two lightest, almost like a peach, a very soft peach, to push out those colors. So I'm going to use a really soft peach and almost like an off-white, like a yellow. This way, I'm not going to really risk going too dark with the background. So I could, with this color here, this pink, I could really put some pressure on it and not really worry about ruining anything. And then I could have that easily fade out because the other color is so light. I could have it drag this pink into the light blue, and because of that, it'll become seamless. And something you're going to find that's really interesting there is, you think yellow and blue make green, but if you do it right, you could bring that light yellow into a light blue, and it never gives a green tone to it, but rather the illusion of a perfect gradient. You could see here I'm putting a decent amount of pressure. I'm still keeping it light, but from your point of view, you're thinking, well, guy, he's barely putting any color on the paper. But that's what you got to be careful of. If your first pass, you clearly see a lot of blue or a lot of color, you might be going too much on the background. Remember, the background, for the most part, is there to accent the image you've just colored, not to distract from it. So I promise at some point, these colors will start to show up. They're going to evolve into something a little more dominant. You're going to start seeing these blues. I'm laying down a really soft surface because when I go into it with my darker blue, I don't want that to be too much. So all I'm really doing here is I'm taking a lot of the tooth out of the paper. So when that darker blue hits it, it's not going to be too dominant. And at the end of the day, I'm laying down groundwork for what I'm about to do. So you see there, the blue I'm using, it's a fairly dominant blue, but A, I'm using very little pressure with it, and B, I'm going on top of a color already there. So I'm laying wax on wax, and because of this, it's going to give it such a really nice, soft gradient that's going to be seamless, and it's gonna when it's all said and done, it's gonna look really nice. It's gonna have a nice flow to it. Now that I've laid down my original soft blue, my base blue, I'm able to use that same blue again as a blender because the darker blue is resting on top of a waxy surface, so it's not going to take much for me to blend it. And this lighter blue does a great job of combining the bottom surface to the top surface, almost like sandwiching that darker blue in the middle. And you can see here while I'm laying down this pink color, if you look at the bottom right, you can see where I just laid that blue down. When you're right up on it, you don't see it as much. And again, I'm just trying to accent the leaves and the pumpkins. This whole foreground, I'm just trying to accent that and make them really just a pretty scenery, make those colors pop. And because I'm using these fall colors, it's not a lot of bright colors, so I'm able to push those by using these soft blues and soft pinks. So you could, again, by stepping back, you can kind of see the groundwork I'm laying with these background real soft colors. And again, look at the pink. See how it's kind of slowly fading into that off yellow, that off white. It just looks really pretty when those two colors join together. If you could find a good base color and a really, really light version of that color, you could do some really fun things with them. So when choosing a blender for the mouse, I went with, I believe this is Prismacolor. It was this or Grizaye. I just happened to grab this one. I didn't want anything too aggressive because it was out of this or Caran because I didn't want anything too aggressive. I wanted to leave some of those accents, but at the same time, I did want to blend, have a nice blend between my dark and light browns. But where his fur on his back, I wanted that to have a nice transition into the tan on his stomach. But I also wanted to keep some of the darks where they were. I wanted to keep the darks around his arms, and I wanted to keep the darks behind his ear. And then I was able to go back into those and add this much darker brown, and that really gives you a really nice gradient between the tan color or the peach color on his belly to that darker fur on his back, and it gave a really good overall look. So, fun fact here, I'm working on the frame now, which is a very dark umber, a dark brown. When I sat down to do this picture, in my head, I had this frame being white, and I had the mouse being white. I had this really cute idea of this little stark white mouse with pink ears and pink nose, pink cheeks, but he was going to be solid white. But when I got to the background, you could see behind the mouse, it is the lightest part of the pink and the lightest part of the blue is right behind him. And this doesn't really do much in the ways of popping him out. And because of that, because that's where those colors landed, I ended up going with brown. But it's funny, if you go back and rewatch me color the mouse, I did everything else but the brown fur. I did the nose, and then I did the ears, and then I did his cheeks, because I really wanted it to work where he was a white mouse, and I think brown was probably the better choice. But because of that, I had to also do the frame colored. I couldn't leave that white because then it had just looked incomplete. If I would have done it white, I would have used one of the medium to dark grays to accent all the shaded parts. So it would have still looked good, but I think for the color palette where it stands now, this brown is a much better direction. So this is just a matter of me going under every single one of these vines. I'm going to add the darkest brown I possibly can, and then have that kind of fade out into like the yellow brown, kind of like what I did on the roots. But I'm going to do that so the yellow never really mixes in any of these vines wrapping around it, and they both are very distinguished. Well, we could wrap this baby up. I tried to get it down. It's down to less than an hour. I just blend the frame with a Caran because I want to keep the little subtle things in there because there's not much going on in this frame. But all in all, I hope you enjoyed this. It was specifically done because I had several of you asking for me to do another one, and I hope this does it. If you want this image, it is in my Etsy. I'll put the link below, and I encourage you to share it with a friend and have a little fun. And to any of you who made it all the way through this, I appreciate you.
Sugar Sogito.